Hey, how you doing? Good morning. All right, now I know this. My talk is gonna make you twitch a little bit because it's gonna go against the grain of your thought process around markup and margin. Okay, and we'll talk about markup and margin later. But my talk is mostly the piece I'm going to talk about is explaining markup. So, but I know you're a big margin guy.
Luckily, within jobs, we both.
I understand that. I understand that, but. For my guys, it's easier for them to multiply than divide and then figure out the cost of goods versus the profit and over, so anyways, it'll make sense. That was a little disclaimer just for you, because I know you're a big margin is what matters more, which is true, but for estimating what we're talking about, it'll make sense. But thanks for being here, guys. Yeah, absolutely. After talking to Anna, I feel like I'm on audition or something, so. Hey, good morning. Good morning. All right.
Decent filter.
Yeah, right. Really decent. Is that working for you or no? Is that QR code working for you?
Not that up there. I think I'll see what
That one will get you the printouts. That one will actually get you some info on me. So. Yep. Is it scanning? I scanned it this morning. Zoom in. Huh. Well, there's one on the table. That's weird. Yeah, there was papers on the table. Huh. Well. All right, we'll make an announcement then. So. Hey, so if you're trying to scan the QR code on the screen, apparently it's not working. There's some papers on the table. If you pass them around, you guys will get the notes from the talk. Tested everything. Tested everything but the QR code on the screen. I don't know. Doesn't make sense. Maybe the resolution or something.
Available. If you want it, scan it.
Yeah. Were you able to get the QR code to scan? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so fill that out.
She might have, no, she had a cake like that.
Hey, what's up? Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming. Hey, good morning. A lot of people.
You got 78.
78?
Yeah, I didn't count the ones with the.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. Does this they can still come in after, right?
Yeah.
I know she's coming. How are you? Good to see you. I know, right? Ridiculous. And it's 8:46. It's like, wow, everybody's on time. Are you ready to go? Am I ready to go? Josh is not going to be here. He's just on standby if we need him or something.
He said that everything was up, leveled out.
All right. Hey.
I got there for 10 minutes and none of the magic.
Yeah, I know, bastards.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Hey, good morning.
Just don't forget to turn it back on.
We're at 80, so 80, 81. She was, I guess, doing registration, so.
Okay, I'm just gonna have 45 numbers.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Ready? I know, right? Yeah. Hey,
I got access denied. You want me to send them in?
Oh no, they're fine. Yeah. What's up?
How's it going?
Yeah. Why would it do access denied? You're going to the Nodger thing, right?
Downstairs, yeah.
Okay. Is that 9 o'clock?
This just started.
This is an hour, yeah.
Okay, I have to be the other one.
Yeah, it's at 9, so.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I was trying to show up.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
I can't miss it.
Yeah, no, I get you.
Good morning, Coach.
Hey, good morning, man. He's fine too. Yeah, I know this guy. How are you, man? Good to see you. Good to see you.
As long as they have that orange tag.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm just gonna let them go. in.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm just gonna stand here.
Access granted. Good morning, everybody. How you doing? So I was waiting. My sound guy said he was going to have like some Back in Black, some really good entrance music, but he hasn't showed up. So we're just going to roll with it. So, but everybody's here for the pool building certification today, right? You're in the right room? No? Okay. I'm just kidding. Obviously, the slides on the screen give it away, but. Thanks for being here. This is a great crowd. You are all on time, so I want to honor that and go ahead and get started. And we've got another speaker coming in shortly right after us here. So the QR code is having some struggles up here. So some of you I saw were able to scan it. Some of you were not. There's some pages on the table that you can scan and pass around if you want, which are going to give you access to all the slides from today. So we got some housekeeping stuff. So part of PSP, they want us to make sure that we turn our cell phones off, which would be polite for me and for everybody else around you. You're not allowed to tape the session, and I think this goes without saying, but there's no smoking in the convention center. So those of you that were planning on it, please don't. You've got the notes you can scan there on it, and after this, there's going to be a survey that you can do inside of the PSP app. So if you would just take the time to do that, they want to make sure that they're providing really good education here for you guys. And it just gives them feedback to make things better for next year. So, but that being said, it's Wednesday. How many of you guys have been out on the strip, out getting some food, some drink? I know some of you guys are at some hockey games. Everybody been having a good time in Vegas? Yeah, fantastic, beautiful. All right, well, it's 8:45. I know it's early. It's like day 2, 3. However, some of you guys have been here since like Saturday or Sunday. So if you can, I want to get some energy going in the room. So if you guys, everybody on your feet, on your feet, on your feet, on your feet. I know you're like, I already got set up. All right, I want you to give 3 high fives to somebody around you and just tell somebody that they're awesome this morning. And let's get some energy going. Fantastic. So, how many of you have heard that there might be a recession coming up? Has anybody heard that there might be a recession coming up? How many people does that kind of make you a little bit squeamish about what you've got going on inside of your business? It's okay if it does. Does it? Okay. I heard something the other day that I thought was super cool, and I want to share with you guys because I've had people ask me that, like are you worried about, or how are you gonna handle things when a recession hits, right? And the thing that I heard the other day that was so cool was that like if you're in business, doing the things that I'm going to talk to you about today, running an actual business, and a recession hits, like that's the coolest thing in the world, because ultimately all the people who have not been doing business correctly, right, that they're just riding this wave of a good economy, they all fall off, right? So does that excite anybody? Like if you're doing things right, this guy here. So if you take some of the things that I'm going to share with you guys today and implement them inside of your business, that's going to be just one little thing, one little turn inside of your business to help make you recession proof. I'm not here to talk about gloom and doom as far as the recession goes or any of that, but it excites me because for me, that means that there's more customers out there. People are going to spend money in any economy, right? So as long as you're doing the marketing, you're doing estimating accurately, you're knowing your numbers, all the things that it takes inside of business, like you're going to be pretty recession proof and you're going to have more opportunity than you currently have now. So that excites me. So first thing I want to talk about is just real quick here, like why did everybody get into business? We obviously got into business because we want to, somebody call something out. Why'd you get into business? Want to make money, obviously, right? What else? Build dreams, help people, freedom. What's that? Set a higher standard. Beautiful. Yeah, so did anybody get into business because they wanted to be a nonprofit? Anyone? I mean, that's okay if you did. Like, one of the driving factors inside of my business, the reason I do what I do inside of my business is because I can give generously. Like, I'm not financially independent to a point where I can be the philanthropist that I want to be in life. So my business gives me the resources to give generously. So, well, none of us got into business to be nonprofit. Essentially, we got into business, most of us, to enjoy the lifestyle that's possible from the business, right? We're not very employable as entrepreneurs, are we? Right? Nobody would want to go punch that clock, right? But we're willing to work 80 to 100 hours a week inside of our own business for a dream of that possibility, right? My goal today is to help you guys access some of the actual lifestyle that you got into business for in the first place. Is anybody open to that, right? Is anybody currently like enthusiastically could say like, I am 100% like living the lifestyle that I got into business for in the first place? Like you have the money that you want, you're able to vacation the way that you want, you're able to spend the time to invest in your family the way that you want. Anybody to that point yet? Beautiful. Some of you guys are. The reality is most of us will never get there. You know why? Because we're all high performers. And as soon as we achieve something, what happens? We set another goal, right? And so that's super exciting, but it's kind of the cycle of being an entrepreneur. So again, my goal today, hopefully, is to just help you guys get a little bit of an insight into how I was able to, and I'll get into who I am in a minute here, but how I was able to get to a point where I'm able to access some of that lifestyle that we all of us got into business for in the first place. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. None of us got into business to be a nonprofit, okay? 3 key takeaways. We've only got less than an hour, so I've got 3 things that I want you guys to take away from today. If you've already downloaded the stuff, you can see it inside of there, but the 3 things are inside of estimating. Like, these are the most important things, in my opinion. Everyone's got an opinion, right? We can go deep into the weeds after this if you want to ask me questions about the specifics of our process. But 3 key things. Step number 1 is you got to know your numbers, okay? And I'm going to talk about that in a minute here. Step number 2 is you've got to know your markup. You can change out that word for margin, and we can go into a deep conversation about that. I don't have time for that today, but you got to know your markup. Like, how do you take what you know the job's going to cost, put a multiplier on it, and that's what I'm going to charge a customer. We're going to talk about that today. The third thing is you got to charge the right price. So once you know your numbers, once you know your markup, you actually have to charge the right price. So that inside of that, I'm going to get into some of the specifics of how you can do actual estimating, how you can take your material costs, your labor costs, the different ways that you can do estimating. And I'll get into that when we get a little bit further ahead. So what qualifies me? So I've paid a super high tuition at the School of Hard Knocks, the SOHK. I've been out there. I've started from 2003. I started my first actual construction business. Prior to that, I was in some other things, but owned some cell phone stores and stuff. But 2003, I started in business, and I was doing everything. I was swinging the hammer. I was doing the estimating. I was doing the designing. I was doing the material takeoffs. I was project managing. I was the warranty guy, the service guy. I was the whatever it was, I was wearing all the hats inside my business. So I literally went to the School of Hard Knocks and learned how to do all the things that I've done. So has anybody been overwhelmed, and I'll go over what this is in a minute, with estimates? Like, you get to a point where, because you're wearing so many hats inside of your business, you're doing the marketing, you're trying to find the leads, you're trying to run the estimates, you're trying to work the jobs that you've already got going on. You've got so many things going on. How many have you ever got to a point where you have like 5, 6, 8, 10 estimates that just have to get out to a customer? Has anybody got to that point, right? All right, so what I share in this room has to stay in this room, and if I hear anyone sharing this outside the room, I'll deny it wholeheartedly, right? But has anybody ever done something that they're not proud of? Anyone? Okay. So this is my I'm not proud of story, right? So you guys have heard of some people, they wing it in business, right? They wing it in business. I was wing-dinging it, all right? The font on this proposal here is wing-ding. You guys are familiar with wing-ding, right? Okay. So I'm at a place. I'm wearing all the hats. I'm trying to be, I'm trying to be there for my wife and for my kids and for my staff and do all the things, doing the sales, doing the estimating, doing the marketing. I've got all these customers that I'm really trying to provide a super great experience for, but I became the status quo of contractors where I didn't get the quote back in the 2 to 3 days that I told them I'd get it back at. Has anybody ever been there? And it's like 2 weeks down the road and it's weighing on you like I told these people I was going to do it. And it's not because I don't want to, right? It's just because I merely have so much pressure and stress on me that I can't get to it. So this is back a previous company. It's not even a company I have anymore. This is probably like 2006, 7. I don't even know. There might be a date on there. Actually, there's not because it's in wing ding. But so what I would do is I would take an old proposal. I would highlight the entire proposal. And then I would change the font to wingding. I'd convert it to a PDF, and I'd email it to the customer. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, here's your proposal. Let me know what you think. I'll be out in the field working today, but just get back to me when you can. And they would obviously respond back. There was no texting back in that 2004 or 5, whatever this was. At least I wasn't. And so they would email or call and be like, hey, I can't open it. And then I would say, well, something must have happened when the file converted to a PDF, right? I'm sorry. I'm on the field today, though, so give me another 24, 48 hours. I'll get it back over to you, right? So I bought myself like a day or two, right? Totally like lying through my teeth. Like, I'm not proud of this, but like this is just where I found myself at. I wanted to show up. I wanted to be the guy, right? But I just didn't have the team, the skills. I was trying to learn as much as I could inside of my trade because most of us got into business because we were good at a certain craft, right? We're not business people. So, right, I knew how to build decks, I knew how to build houses, garages, whatever, but now all of a sudden I've got to be the head of marketing, the head of finance, I've got to handle all the things that come along with that, right? Legal, you just name it. And so you get into business with a trade, and now you've got to learn how to do 15 other things, or build a staff to be able to do it. So again, what qualifies me? I've literally been through the war. I've got the scars, the wounds. I've lost limbs through the process. But that's a little bit about what qualifies me. Who am I? My name's Chris Breen. I own a company called Legacy Decks and Outdoor Living currently. I also own a business, a training academy called the Legacy Decks Academy. This is just a little bit about who I am. So I used to live in Michigan from up until 2004. I moved to South Carolina in 2004, which is where I live now. My current business, Legacy Decks, started in 2016. Currently, we do about $5 million in outdoor living projects a year annually. The business essentially runs itself. And so the academy that I'm doing now, doing the teaching that I'm doing, I'm trying to give back because I don't really have a job inside of my company anymore. But I'm too young to retire and financially not where I want to be, right? And so I'm teaching now. I've got 3 kids. They're actually currently 18, 17, and 9. When I sold my last company, we bought that RV that you see there, and we did like what people would say is a once-in-a-lifetime trip, but I'll challenge you, like, I'm going to do this again. But we drove cross-country from the East Coast to the West Coast, did 11,000 miles over 5 or 6 months with my kids. They were like 2, 10, and 11 at that point. Fantastic trip when I sold one of my companies in 2013. I sold the company where I was wing-dinging it because I was just burned out, right? And that's what we did when we did that. When I'm not traveling, hanging with my family, running my business, I like to do endurance races. So those are some Spartan race pictures. That's actually my head of sales right there, who's in the room back there, Nick. And so we do some Spartan races. I've got a race coming up in December. Actually, I'll do my second trifecta. But that's just a little bit about who I am. All right, we got a lot to cover, so we're gonna keep going. So step number 1 that I said is, everyone together? Know your numbers, louder, everyone. Step number 1, got to know your numbers, right? Marcus Lemonis says, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. Most people, when I sit down, and you guys aren't most people because you're here, but most people, when I sit down and ask them a question about, like, what's their revenue, what's their average cost of goods on a job, like, they don't know these things. What's their margin? What's the markup you charge? Why do you charge what you charge? I charge that because it covers what I think it should cover, and then I make some money, and most people don't know their numbers, right? And so Marcus Lemonis would say, like, you don't know your business if you don't know your numbers. So what numbers do we need to know? What numbers matter? What are some numbers that you guys, like, if you were on an island right now and your team had to report back to you numbers so that you knew the health of your business, what are some numbers that would be important to you guys?
Profit and loss.
Profit and loss, okay, but what's on the profit and loss? That's a big document. Revenue, margins, okay. Labor costs, so cost of goods, right? You guys are hitting all those. So these are just kind of some of the key ones that I look at as like a baseline starting point for figuring out what you should charge inside of your estimating. So revenue, which revenue, some people you can call revenue, call it sales, and there's gonna be all kinds of different variations of what I'm gonna talk about today, but for me inside of my business, revenue is like built money, like the money has come in. You might sell $5 million worth of business, right? But you might only produce $4 million of revenue, okay? Like you actually only collect and some of it rolls over. Does that make sense? Make sense, everybody? Okay, so for me, revenue is deposits plus draws, which is essentially when you sell a job, you get a deposit, and then when you produce the job, you start to collect draws throughout the process, okay? That's revenue. Overhead is anything that's non-job related, okay? If it can't be charged directly to a job, it's overhead, okay? Somebody help me out here. Is a project manager an overhead cost or a cost of goods? No. How are you going to charge a project manager to every job? I'm open to somebody talking to me about that, but overhead is, so if there's a staff inside of your company, that would be like saying that your administrative assistant is a cost of goods, right? Yes, they do something that's related to the Smith job and the Jones job and the whatever other job, right? They do something that's related to that, but an overhead cost, go ahead. Correct, which your operations are an overhead cost, right? We won't get deep into that, but we can argue that thing right left. Some of you may be able to charge a project manager to a specific job, but inside of your estimating, it's going to be an overall overhead cost. So we'll get into that. But cost of goods, which is a direct job-related cost. So your builder that's on the job, they're only working on that specific job, right? Your project manager's truck, that's an overhead cost. It's not a cost of goods. Gross profit margin, which is your revenue, so your total revenue minus your cost of goods is your profit margin, and then your net profit is revenue minus overhead minus cost of goods. Does that make sense? Everybody understand the difference between gross profit and net profit? Net profit is like the bottom number, like that's what's left over after you pay everything else. That's your net profit, okay? Some people get a little bit confused on that too when I ask them, like, what was your net profit last year? Well, it was 25%. And I'll say, okay, did you pay yourself? Well, no, that's included in there. Well, you have to take that out. If you're actively doing something inside of your business, if you would have to pay someone to do that job, that's not net profit. So if you had $300,000 in net profit in your mind, but you didn't pay yourself, like it comes out of that profit, you'd have to take that out. So let's say it's $100,000. You actually only have $200,000 in net profit. Does that make sense? Okay, so those are numbers, and again, this is all my opinion, so you guys are here to hear what I have to say, and so I've got the clicker, we're gonna keep going here. So step number 1 is, gotta know your numbers, right? Step number 2 is you've gotta know your markup, okay? So now once we know our numbers, we've got the spreadsheet, we know all our overhead costs, we know what our office staff costs us, we know what our office supplies cost us, our facilities cost us, our truck, all of our overhead stuff, we know all those numbers, right? We know what our revenue is. How do we figure out what our markup needs to be? Does anybody feel super confident that they know their markup at a super high level? They use the same markup for the same job or cost that they do inside of their business. Does anybody know that they do that really well? Yeah? Okay, beautiful. So you guys can give me some feedback on this afterwards. But what's the right markup? What's the right markup? Like if you're in any networking groups or even at this show, like people talk about, like, what's the markup I should be charging? And it's kind of it's really not a question that you can answer, right? There's like 87 people in this room right now, right? There's 87 different markup numbers that would come out of this room, markup margin, okay? Because the reality is your overhead cost is going to be drastically different than the person next to you's cost, and no one's going to have the exact same overhead cost. And so your markup numbers are all going to be completely different. And this will make sense in a minute here, but so all that just to say there's no correct markup cost. So I'm going to go through some examples here, and if you don't have something to write on, get something from your neighbor if you want to. You don't need to, but I'm going to go through some scenarios here and give you some examples to kind of have it make sense. And it's going to be a little bit of a heavy lift, and it's going to be kind of workshop-y, not super exciting, but I think it'll be exciting when you see, like, there's not a ton of numbers that you need to have dialed in to be able to nail that markup. And the reason I'm going through this, and some of this, we can get into the weeds of how we do our estimating. How do we take initial phone calls? What are the questions we have to answer when we go to the job site? What are some of the resources and tools and technology, which I'm gonna get into as we get down the road here. But like, if you guys don't have this stuff right, it doesn't matter what piece of software you have inside of your business, what technology you have. Like if you don't have these things right, it doesn't matter what the person on the phone is saying to filter out those customers of yours. If you don't know your numbers and you don't know your markup and you're not charging the right price, none of that stuff matters. So we'll get into that. But these, in my mind, this is the most important stuff. We have to have this on lockdown first. So as an example job here, we're going to talk about a projected revenue. So is there anybody that doesn't have a good idea on what their revenue will be in 2023? And some of you might be in startup mode, so you're not super clear on that. And I can help you figure out how to do some predictions of that. But in this example, I'm going to use super simple numbers, and there's no need to like argue or question the percentages because these are just for an example purposes, right? So in this example, I'm going to give like a projected revenue of $1 million. Okay, so we're gonna actually collect $1 million this year inside of this example. Your overhead costs are going to be about 30%. That's trucks, staff inside of your office. In our industry, the average overhead costs range between 24 and 54%. Just depends on, whether you've got a building and you've got 3 project managers and you've got 4 trucks, like our overhead costs are going to vary, but between 24 and 54 is about the average. 30% is what I used here. And then your net profit we're looking for in this example is 10%, like a bottom line. After everything's paid, you're paid for what you do inside of the business, you make $100,000. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So inside of this example, the way that we calculate markup, and that's what we're trying to do here, because step number 1 was know your numbers. Step number 2 is know your markup. Okay, beautiful. So in order to know our markup, and these are not super complicated formulas, and I don't mean to get into all this math with you guys, but the example here is you take your revenue, which is $1 million, and then you subtract out your overhead cost plus your profit, okay? So the $1 million minus $4 million gives you $600,000. So that's your cost of goods. Cost of goods being any material or labor item that's directly related to a job. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So in this example here, step 2 is you're going to take your revenue and divide it by your cost of goods. So if you have $1 million collected, you divide it by your cost of goods of $600,000. Your markup is 1.67, and I'm going to show you a little bit deeper inside of that. But does that make sense to everyone? I'm going to reverse engineer it and show you guys how to kind of check the math on that. So just let's go ahead and check the work. So let's just say, forget all the numbers I just showed you there a minute ago. Let's just say that you are estimating one project that's got a $600,000 cost of goods. So the labor on it, the material costs on it, any subcontractors on it is $600,000. From that $600,000, you multiply it by 1.67, which is the markup that we determined was accurate for it, and your projected revenue is $1 million. Okay? Inside of that, you've got $400,000 left, which we figured was our overhead and our net profit. So reverse engineering that example there, that's how we would check to make sure that our 1.67, I know this is super fun, lots of math, but is that making sense to everyone? Riley, does that make sense? Makes great sense. It's super sexy, right? All right, so let's move on from there and take a look at what that translates to inside of an actual example. So how many people are owner-operators? You actually do something actively inside of your business. You do sales, you do marketing, you do building. Okay, so in this example here that I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to take an example of where you want to make $100,000 inside of your business, and you actively work inside of the business. So same example, you're going to have $50,000 in payroll and $50,000 in profit to get to that $100,000. Okay? So in this example here, same numbers that we just used before, but what I'm going to show you here is if you actually are working inside of your business, you can charge a lower markup if you have the same goal. So in that last example I showed you guys, the goal was to get to $100,000 in actual take-home net bottom line profit. If you're working inside of the business and you still want to make that same $100,000, you can actually lower your markup, and I'll show you how here. So your cost of goods actually goes up to $650,000 in this example, and your markup would only be 1.54%. Okay? Does that make sense? Got crickets. What's that? Paying yourself $50,000, yep. And then you're taking home $50,000 in profit, which means your markup could go down. And I'll show you kind of a comparison on that. So we got to know our numbers, we got to know our markup. So let's compare that. So we've got an owner versus an owner operator. So an owner is someone who's not actively doing something inside of their business, okay? I don't actively do anything inside of my deck business currently, okay? Outside of lead my team. I'm not project managing, I'm not selling, I'm not even running my operations. So I strictly draw a profit from my company. That's an owner. An owner operator, somebody who is building, selling, project managing, let's say. So if you're an owner, and this example here is going to give you guys an idea of what it looks like, why you might bid the same job against someone else and you're going to be more expensive, right? Because you have more overhead costs inside of your business, which arguably, if you have more overhead costs inside of your business, you have better systems, you have bigger teams, you should be providing a better experience, right? Which should demand a higher price. There's more likelihood that you're going to be in business longer. You're going to be able to service that client longer, okay? So in this example, you've got the same job. So you're bidding a job. Your cost of goods on it is $40,000. The example on the left, he's got higher overhead. He's taking just profit out of the company. It was a 1.67 markup versus a 1.54. So your contract price on these two is $66,800 versus $61,600, which is a difference of $5,200, right? So when I said there could be 87 different versions of markup inside of the room, this is an example of it, right? I know that in my market, we're probably the most expensive in our market because we have the most overhead. And so for me, I'm okay with that because we're providing a better experience. We're able to service our customers better. We're able to support them better. But you can see here, if you have your markup wrong, let's just say your markup, you're not covering all your overhead costs or you're not calculating your cost of goods accurately, you're going to be underestimating on your jobs. And if you're only making a 10% net profit, then you're going to lose money. So this just kind of gives you guys an example of what that looks like. So step number 1 we said was? Step number 2 is know your markup. I'm going to stop there before we go on. So is there questions inside of the math on that? Because I know there's a lot of numbers up there, but anything that anybody wants to ask on as far as like what I'm trying to communicate here? Is this making sense? Go ahead.
So when you're doing a job and you're costing it out, you focus on markup versus the margin?
So, yeah, that's a conversation. We can go deeper on that. But yes, I look at both really, right? And margin essentially is the percentage difference between your overhead and net profit versus your cost of goods, right? So that's to work with markup, you have to do division. And what I've found is my sales guys in the field are much better at multiplication, right? So if you know your markup is 1.67, or let's just say 1.5, they can take a cost, multiply it by that. If you're working with margin, your margin number typically is going to be your gross margin, which gross margin is your overhead and your net profit, okay? Once you figure out your gross margin, let's say that's a percentage of 43, okay, which then makes your your cost of goods would be the difference of 43 from that, so that's 57, right? So you're 57. So you actually have to divide your cost of goods by 57, not the 43. So if I told you your gross margin is 43%, you can't divide by 43. You can't take your cost of goods, right? So you can't take your cost of goods and divide by 43. You got to divide by 47. So and this is why we don't, or 57. This is why I don't work in margin as much as I do markup, because it's easier to multiply than divide. It's easier to screw up. If you figure a 43% margin, you can't actually use that number against your cost of goods. You have to use the cost of goods. Anyways, but there's some phenomenal software. We got the guys from JobTread up here in front, and that's actually the software that we utilize inside of our business to make this stuff super simple, right? And they work inside of it with markup and margin, so you can see both numbers, which is super. I love the visibility of it because it helps people understand that, like, if I'm at a 43% margin, my markup is actually like 73, 74. Eric, help me on that. 43% margin would be about a 73%, 74% markup. Gets confusing, but the software platform helps fix that. So, but that was a good question, though. Do you work in margin typically, or?
Well, we actually use JobTread too.
Oh, okay, beautiful. So you're kind of familiar with you typically see the margin number. Some more JobTread groupies. So.
We did not plant that.
Fantastic. All right. Any more questions about markup versus margin? No, or not even markup versus margin. I don't want to have that conversation. That gets super confusing. But just overall, like. Questions about this? Or do you have a scenario that you want me to help you figure based on some numbers that you have? Go ahead. What I mean, it's gonna be better to be as accurate as possible. How about that? But you are gonna, and there's a slide later on down here that I'll share with you. But it's called estimating, not exacting, right? For a reason, because we're estimating. And so later on, I'm gonna go through this. But you essentially want to have, if you don't have the data to back up what you're doing, what you're trying to figure out, then I would say overestimate for sure. But if you have enough historical data, then you should be able to analyze your projects and see how far over under are you typically. And there's always going to be a markup, a margin of error that we're calculating into it. So contingencies, if you will. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So if you're newer in business, I would definitely err on the side of overestimating, right? But we typically build out an annual budget for the year and then figure out what our markup should be. And then we track it throughout the year against our jobs to make sure how we're performing, right? The only way we can do that is with, and I'm not going to get deep into like tools and technology, but having the right technology and tools to do that, right? And again, I've been on a different platform estimating wise for 6+ years, and JobTread has solved some major things that I've had to do with spreadsheets and Word documents and DocuSigns and like 12 other things. And so, you know, again, I'm not here to promote, but if something works, like I feel like you guys should have access to it. So, but there's plenty of other technology and software that can work out there for you if you utilize it properly, right? So don't just sign up for 12 memberships from all these vendors out here if you're not going to utilize something properly. So, but finding a really good all-in-one tool like that has been transformational for our business. And made it so that we can be better predictors and also figure out how accurate we are so that we can make sure that, because if you're charging 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points more than you need to, you might lose a job that you could otherwise get unnecessarily. So, go ahead.
One question I have is, I speak to a lot of contractors, and there's a number of clients I'll speak to that they're kind of saying no to work, and they more or less have some version of this hammered out already. How do they strike that balance between finding the appropriate markup to have to make sure they're not saying no to too much work, but they're maximizing the profits they can make on every project?
Sure. So simplest form, what's your question then?
Simplest form is
make sure they're not charging too much?
If you're saying no to work and you know your overhead and your markup and all that, how do you find the right price to raise your price to make sure you're not saying no to too much and not losing too much either?
Yeah, so for us, that's a good question, multi-layered to that. But we really try to be as accurate as possible to hit we have like our baseline number that we want to make sure that we hit throughout the year, right? And if we get to a point where we're having to turn away too much work, or we have more work coming in than we can actually satisfy, then that's when you have to take a look at like whether your margins are too low, and are you hitting that profit that you want to hit inside of the business, or can you tweak the numbers up a little bit so that you actually are utilizing your estimating as kind of a filtering tool is more or less, I think, Riley, what you're getting at there? Maybe? Okay. Do you have an answer you'd like to share inside of that?
No.
No?
I just want to hear your take.
Okay, beautiful. Anything else? No? Okay. So once we know our numbers and we know our markup, let's see if my clicker is going to work here. We know our numbers, we know our markup. We need to know how to charge. We need to charge the right price, right? And so how do we calculate the right price? There's several different ways that you can estimate projects. Does anybody have an example of how they estimate their projects? Who does estimating inside of their company? You do? Okay. So how do you do an estimate for a project?
35%.
Okay, so 35% markup across the board. Okay, but even back before that, like how do you calculate your cost of goods? Maybe that's a better question I could ask you. Okay. You the same? Okay. So do you figure out like the cost of every item?
So most of our guys are $30 an hour, and I charge $140 an hour.
Okay. So you're figuring out the labor costs.
Yeah, and that covers all the trucks. We got 44 of them.
Yeah. Okay, so you have an overhead percentage that a number that covers the overhead inside of there. Okay. What about materials?
It's 35% as well.
Okay. But you figure out every material that goes into it, right? Okay. So you're doing what I would call stick estimating, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So there's a couple different ways you can calculate price. The first one is you can take a WAG. Anybody know what a WAG is? Wild ass guess, right? Anybody ever done a swag? A scientific wild ass guess? Like this job was this much, so like this one should probably be about the same. Right? Anybody ever done that? Right? All right. No, we're not going to do that one either, right? Now, stick estimating, which I'm going to go into in a minute, and unit estimating, which we're able to lump things together. So I'll explain what that means. So stick estimating, we're not going to do a WAG, we're not going to do a swag, like just throw those things out the window, unless you just mark the hell up out of it and you're like, if I get it, that's fantastic. Like, great. If you got the ability to do that, fantastic. So I used to do mostly stick estimating, which is why it took me so long to get my estimates out, right? Because I had to figure out every stick, every brick, every man hour, all the subcontractors. Like, I had to be as accurate as possible inside of that. I would literally build every job in a spreadsheet, get the pricing on it, and then from there I would calculate my markup, right? That takes a long time to do. The other thing is it's not very duplicatable, right? How many of you guys want to actually, either you are currently or you want to scale your business? You want to scale it, right? So if you are the only person that knows how you build that deck, that pool, whatever the thing you build is, if you're the only one that knows how to do that, you can't scale your business. You've basically just created a job for yourself, right? And we all agreed we want to take advantage of some of the lifestyle that our business should be able to afford us. All right, so stick estimating. It's not a bad way to go, and you can systematize that version of it. But what I prefer, again, this is a great way to do it. I did it for a long time. If you've got a bunch of super skilled people to do it, my salespeople, Nick in the back there, like he's sold probably $10 million worth of decks since he's worked with me, right? He should not even be allowed to touch a hammer, let alone figure out how many joists should go on that deck, right? He just doesn't know how to do it. And the majority of my sales team has little to no knowledge inside of building what we actually do. And so they couldn't do stick estimating because they wouldn't know how to calculate that. Now, you could have someone in your office that is an estimator, right? They do the takeoffs, they figure out all that. Your salesperson takes that and sells the job. You can do that as well. It's a very accurate way to do it. For me, what I've decided to do inside of my company is do unit estimating or cost group estimating, which is, well, let me stop there. So with the stick estimating, like I said, you take your sticks, your bricks, your man hours, your subcontractors, which are essentially all cost of goods, okay? Once you have all of your cost of goods, and we already determined our markup, okay? You're gonna multiply that cost of goods. Let's just say the cost for $40,000 on this particular job, all right? So you're not figuring out like what your overhead or is anything. We're literally just looking at the cost of goods. Multiply that by your markup, which covers your overhead costs that we figured out before, and you get a job price on that of $66,800. Okay? So that's how you would do stick estimating. It just takes a little bit longer to do unless you've got the team in place and the structure to do it. For me, to scale our business, we're actually using unit estimating, which I'll show you here. So unit estimating. Also, in the software that we use, I consider it's cost group estimating. So we take a group of costs and apply it to something. So what do I mean by that? Let's say we have this deck here, or this deck that I'm standing on top of here. And you've got the framing. We're just going to look at the framing. So the unit that we're looking at is the framing unit. And in this example I used is a 300 square foot deck. Okay? The reason I do that is our average deck is 300 square feet. Okay? So if I can figure out what are all the components to a 300 square foot deck, so the joists, in this case here, the joists for that deck were $1,300. Don't quote these numbers. The fasteners were $100, the hangers were $100, and the labor was $1,500. Okay? And again, if you have the right software to do this, I have all these things pre-built out so that when we go into JobTread, we're able to just calculate the size of the deck and it multiplies across this unit. Okay, so for this unit, just stay with me here. With this 300 square foot unit, the cost on that is going to be $3,000. Okay? Then I take that and I divide it by 300. It gives $10 per square foot. So now Nick, who doesn't know how many joists go into a 300 square foot deck or how many hanger nails we need or how many joist hangers, any of those things, or G-tape, all those things, he has no idea, but he can work a tape measure, right? So he goes out and measures a deck that's 450 square feet. Well, we know that our deck at 300 square feet costs $10 a square foot. So now we can take that $10 a square foot, apply it to the 450, and now he's charging $4,500. Nick has no idea how that deck goes together, but with unit cost estimating, you're able to estimate things really quick, right? If you can count the number of posts on a deck and apply that to a unit, because in our unit costing, we're calculating the labor, the materials, everything that go into it. Does that make sense? Does anybody use unit estimating or cost group estimating? Okay. Have you built that out in JobTread yet? You have? Okay. It's revolutionary, right? Yeah. So that's unit estimating. Inside of that, is there any like scenario that anybody wants me to run through on how you would use unit estimating in your particular business? For anybody that's not using that. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so again, pretty much inside of anything that you're doing, if you can take a scenario that you typically would run into, like what's your average distance that you're having to run? Is there an average? 40 foot? Okay, so you would just pull out what are all the components that go in that 40 foot, and you can put it in a spreadsheet, you can put it in a software, but what's the labor to dig the trench? What's the labor or what's the pipe that's gonna go in the trench? I don't know anything about pools, so I apologize, but if you can calculate what is everything that it takes to do that 40 foot, because you can do that, right? Okay, and then divide that by the 40 foot, you could come up with a lineal foot price to charge. Now, there's units, like this, when you scale something, sometimes things get cheaper, right? If I build a 15,000 square foot deck versus a 300 square foot deck, there's some things that aren't going to scale at the same rate. But the good thing is it scales in the positive for you. Like you're probably charging more than you should for that. So, but for the most part, if you can work in averages, at least that's what I've found, is that if we have our average project is 300 square feet, what does it take to build that? What's the average? From here, I can also figure out the deck boards that go on that. So on a 300 square foot deck, we're gonna have this many deck boards, this many fasteners. I pay my guys this much per square foot to frame it. So we just basically break each component of the project into a unit that we can group, or a cost group in job trade terms, or what other software terms you want to use. But you have the cost, and you group them together and divide that by whatever the unit was, right? If it's lineal foot, if it's square foot. I'll give you an example. So we get down into the nitty gritty. Back to your question about like how do you cover all of the variables and make sure you're not charging too much, too little. As we've gotten better at this and more scientific, if my guys have to carry lumber 150 feet, that's about the average, right? So if I ask them to carry the lumber further than 150, we actually have a multiplier that we put in there for if they've got to go 350 feet, we're going to pay them this much per foot. So my sales guys are measuring when they go to the job. From the driveway, what's the distance to the backyard? Up to 150 is included in the framing costs. Like we expect you to have to move lumber. It's just part of your job, right? But if you have to move an excessive amount of distance, how do you calculate that? If you're building a deck that's 6 feet off the ground versus 10 feet off the ground, right? What's the difference? It's going to be more expensive for the posts, for the labor. They're working on ladders, things like that. So we actually have a way that we can calculate that. So my sales guys, all they've got to do is be able to go out and measure. And this applies to pools as well, right? What's the terrain like that you're working on that you're going to have to deal with? How are you going to mobilize material to the backyard? If you've got to bring cranes in, things like that. So you can literally build out units for any scenario that you're talking about doing. So does that make sense? Beautiful. Go ahead.
Do you switch back to stick when the customer requests something highly custom?
Mm-hmm.
You don't do very often.
Sure. We do, yeah, absolutely. And then when we do that, typically my salesperson is going to go to my head of operations or a project manager on our team, be like, hey, bro, how do I build this thing, right? And then they get involved in that process. So, but yes, absolutely. There's still some of that. Like it's not going to solve every scenario that you have, but to scale a business, you got to try to figure out as many systems that you can put in place that are going to free up your team to be able to do their job as fast and efficiently as possible. Plus, it takes you away from being that wingding contractor, that status quo guy that just can't get stuff done, right? So, good question though.
The other thing you can do is, what I do is just, I have subs just bid out
Yep.
X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
Then I take the numbers, mark them up, and
Yeah, sure. And I love that. Like if you have the time and your customer is willing to wait and you set the expectation, this is how long it's going to take. Yeah.
do a lot of renovations.
Yep.
I mean, you can't just do, let's say, $12 a foot for conduit.
Mm-hmm.
Because they might be running it up the wall, through the attic,
Yeah.
hard dig,
Yep.
going out conduit.
Yep. Yeah, so I'll say this: you can be much more accurate, which is going to give you a higher probability of winning business. The more accurate you are, if you exactly, and you're going to have a profit. And that's ultimately what this is: knowing your numbers, right? And so we do some things like electrically and plumbing wise in my business, and deck business doesn't have as much as plumbing does, obviously, where we calculate based on our subcontractors that we have relationships with as best we can. But when it comes to custom stuff, there's just no way that you can force it into this, cost group or unit costing.
No way to just price it out.
Yeah.
It's just
Yep.
unless you're dealing with just dirt.
Yep.
Do you find that because you're able to do this, you're generating more business because you bid more, because your guy is out there more,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
as
Yep.
opposed to a guy that's doing it by stick and it takes 3 or 4 hours to put
Yeah.
together, 5 hours? Your salesman should be able to walk out there
Yeah.
and give the homeowner a pretty accurate price.
Sure. So the question is like, are you finding more success by being able to do this quicker, essentially? And absolutely, 100%. Like time kills all deals, right? Time kills all deals. I have a member of the academy right now that we just were talking about this recently. He's got very backed up in his estimating because he's wearing too many hats inside of his business. And so in that case there, we had to get really clear about like what's the expectation with the customer. Once you pass that expectation, like if you said 3 days, like your probability is drastically going down every day that ticks past. I don't care how much they like you, how charismatic you are, like you didn't do what you said you're gonna do, right? And you can be in like the top 1% of contractors by doing 3 things. Showing up when you say you're going to show up, cleaning up after yourself, and just doing what you say you're going to do, right? You haven't even swung the hammer outside of the doing thing. Like you've got to do those 3 things really well, and you'll set yourself apart for higher success. So yes, the faster you can do things, the better. My sales guys all the time have customers that are waiting on that other bid. We're waiting on that other bid. And so we're trying to solve problems for that. How do we increase our trust factor with people so that they're not waiting on the other bid? They want to do business with us at such a high level because the experience was so fluid, so just natural for them to do that they're not waiting on the other bid, right? And I don't know, do we get much waiting on the other bid stuff still? I mean, we still do.
Here and there, but
Yeah.
definitely separate.
Yeah. Anything you can do to separate yourself from the competition, the way you present yourself inside of your estimating, the time that you do things, the way your team shows up with the technology on the job site, absolutely so. But, yeah.
Do you shoot to like get an estimate out quick because you can, or do you set the expectation like, hey, 3 days, like let them sit on the estimate?
Yeah. So that goes into a little bit more of the details of how we do our process. Like, that's one question I would ask everybody. Do you have a sales process that you have documented visually that you share with your customer that will set you apart, right? And I don't have it on this slide deck, but my guys have a 8.5 by 11 hard card stock that they leave with every customer. It shows the process. Like, here's the next thing we're going to do with you. You're walking them through your process. So whatever your process is, just do that. But yes, and that's a whole other conversation. So I consider estimating different than proposals. Like, we give free estimates, which an estimate essentially is the cost that you believe something will be based on your knowledge, experience, and expertise in the industry, right? So this deck here, this 250 square foot deck is going to cost $25,000. And we would do an estimate. It's going to be $25,000 to $30,000. Does that sound like something that you'd be in the market for, or do we need to look at a different budget for you? That's an estimate. So we give free estimates all day long, and the speed at which we do those is dependent upon the skills that my sales guy has. My new guy that just came in, he can't sit down with Mr. and Mrs. Jones and be like, hey, that deck there, what we're talking about, plugging it in real quick, it's going to be about $35,000 to $40,000. Is that what you guys are thinking, right? And so, but proposals, we try to get out within about 24 to 48 hours. But we don't do that until we have somebody that says, yes, that's in our budget range. Yes, you're creating what we want to have inside of that space. And we want to work with you. And we actually charge for our proposals, and that's on a later slide here too. But we do free estimates, but once we start working for you, right, you're not going to go to the mechanic and have them diagnose your car, or go to the doctor and have them tell you what's wrong with you, or for free, right? So why do contractors still do so much work for free, right? Because people think free estimates. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, typically, yes. I mean, we can do some stuff over the phone. We try to wash out budget stuff on the phone on the first or second call. So when the customer calls in, we have a scenario that we go through with our front office person that answers the phone. Our sales team then reaches back out, tries to pre-qualify as well. We try to not get out there without having an average idea of what they want to spend budget-wise. But then on site, we're doing estimating, unless the sales guy just doesn't have the skills, and then he's coming back to the office, plugging some stuff into our software, and then calling the customer back, hey, based on what we talked about the other day, it's going to be $35,000 to $40,000. Do you want to move forward with the next step, which they already know the next step is to do a design and planning agreement with us. So we're going to design and plan your project for whatever, $750. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so we do welcome emails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Send out the email that sets the expectation.
Yep.
And then what basically the process is after that.
Yep.
Deposit, what's required
Yeah, having a process that you can walk your customer through so they know what to expect next. It also makes it easier for you having that email. So after we book an appointment, they get an email, welcome email that has a little video from our salesperson that says, hey, I'm going to be the one that's coming out to see you. Here's a video that shows our process. We actually had like a doodly cartoon video that shows our whole process. So that 2 or 3 times they're hearing, we're going to talk budget, we're going to talk budget, we're going to talk budget. So it's not like a shocker when you show up and be like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, what's your budget on this, right? So anything you can do to expedite that process or to share that process with people is going to speed up, also create trust. So, but all right, let's wrap through this, then we can end with some questions. We got like 7 minutes, and they've got somebody else coming in right after me. But what's that? Absolutely. Is the doctor going to give you back your diagnosis fee if you go in for, like, your heart's giving you problems and, well, here's what's going on, Bob. But if you don't have me do the heart surgery, you can go ahead and give me that money back.
But otherwise, you put it towards the actual cost.
Sure, yeah, it goes toward. It's work we have to do anyways, just get paid for it, right? If you're doing 100 projects a year and your sales team is spending, 3, 4, whatever hours it takes for you to do a design and an estimate on that, just capture that revenue. It's not a huge, like, profit, driver for us, but go ahead.
Yeah. How detailed is your estimate?
How detailed?
Yeah, they show every item, every concept.
So it's very detailed, but we don't do line item pricing, right? Line item price, and that's a good conversation we can have as well, but line item pricing gives your customer the opportunity to think it's like an a la carte. Oh, well, I can do the painting, or I can dig the trench for that line, or so I don't personally do that. Now, we do give them options to upsell themselves. Again, a super cool feature inside of JobTread. If a customer says, hey, they want to have the TimberTech Prime line of decking, well, I can put that in there as a selection, but I can also give them 2 upgrades, like a good, better, best. And so when they get their proposal, they literally can check a couple different boxes and build out a number that works for them. They might upsell themselves on a lighting package, or a different texture on the pool deck, or whatever the case may be. So, but we don't do line item pricing. That's just our way that we do it. So, but all right, like I said, it's called estimating, not exacting. Errors are going to happen. So errors are going to happen inside of labor, subcontractors, material. You've got to estimate for contingencies, which goes back to what you said earlier. So essentially, what we do is we review our projects just to determine like how far off. And most of the time, the better you get at this, you're going to find that your profit is going to be bigger than you anticipated because you're getting better and more efficient inside of your estimating, inside of your fulfillment. And so more often than not, we don't actually have an error in the negative. We have if you can call it an error, in the positive. We were anticipating 12% net profit. We made 14% net profit, right? But if you don't have that dialed in, then because you forgot to charge, like my subcontractors have exposed us to things that we need to make sure we charge for. Well, I had to carry that lumber 1,200 yards to the backyard. Like, you got to pay me for that. Okay, fine. Put it in the estimate, like put it in our estimating software. You're basically just, most of us would just be throwing stuff in and not capturing that revenue, but you're paying it out. So the goal is, instead of estimating, know your numbers, right? Know your markup and charge the right price. The only way you can charge the right price is if you're as accurate as possible at what it's going to take to fulfill that. Getting quotes from your subcontractors, obviously that's huge. Determining what your unit cost is for per lineal foot on, laying pipe, whatever the case may be. So, but you can go back and look historically at what that is. But if you're wearing 15 hats inside of your business, sometimes it's hard to stop long enough to go back and say, oh, well, on these last 12 jobs, we lost money. So instead, we keep running, driving more revenue, and those are the companies that when a recession hits, they don't know their numbers. They actually lost money on the last, 8 months worth of projects, and recession hits and they can't weather the storm. So do that. Stop working for free, which we talked about that. This is just my own personal take on it. We did this a long time ago, and it just has revolutionized our business. Our guys, they sell design and proposal fees. And the customer gets a very clear, like, this is what you're going to get for it. You're going to get a fixed cost proposal. You're going to get a 3-dimensional design. You're going to get a feasibility study to make sure that we can even do your project based on the permitting in your municipality. So for that fee, you're going to get all of this. And I'm going to give it to you. And you may decide to take that design and that fixed cost proposal and go somewhere else. But at least you'll be able to tell that contractor, so you own it. You paid me $750, it's yours. We hope you hire us. We hope you earn your business, right? But stop working for free, I would tell you guys. And some people will say, well, it's an industry standard that we give free estimates. I will challenge you that it's also industry standard to be a broke contractor that can't pay their bills, right?
We were also talking about doing an estimate that's a ballpark
Yep. That's an estimate. Yeah. Yeah.
You're charging, you're making money for the actual proposal, so you're not spinning your wheels.
Yep. Exactly. You're working for the customers that you should be working for. Like some of us have this scarcity mentality that's like, oh, I've got to do a bid for every customer, right? You don't. Some people's money you don't want. You shouldn't work for everyone. Like that's just the way it is. Our average project, the more and more that we got to know our numbers and what we should charge a project, we actually have our average cost on a deck project just over the last 3 or 4 years has gone from $25,000 to $60,000 for our average deck. We built the same number of decks in 2022, roughly about the same number of decks in 2022 as we did in 2019, but our revenue has more than 2x'd. So that's kind of huge for us. And we did that by knowing our numbers, because the better you are at what you do, the better clients that you're going to attract, the better people you're going to attract to your team. Like there's all kinds of benefits inside of this. So, step number 1 is, step number 2, know your markup. Step number 3, charge the right price. Question?
How do you find good guys?
So wait, I do have a whole theory on that, guys, and I don't have time to go into that today. But again, look us up at the Legacy Decks Academy. But I'll be honest with you, like we don't have an issue finding good guys. We literally attract people to our team because of what we put out there into the world. Like we have such a clear vision on where we're going, that and the purpose inside of why we do what we do, the core values inside of our business. There's literally, we have people moving from across the country to come work with us because they want to be a part of the vision that we have. So I'll challenge you, if you're struggling to find good people, the first thing you need to look at is like, who are you as a person, right? And is that going to attract people into your organization? Are you clear about what you're building, why you're building it? I had one member inside of Legacy Decks Academy that their purpose was to build a $100 million business and sell it in 3 years, right? Who do you think you're going to attract to your team if that's your goal? If that's what you want to attract, you're going to attract people that only care about money. Okay, great. You're going to sell your company for $100 million. How much do I get? Like, what does it mean to me? We had to totally revamp. Like, they want to do good things in their community, but like, you've got to get clear about who you are as a company first before you can just start. You're not going to craft a job description that's going to attract people to your team. You've got to really figure out like who you are as a company, what's the vision for where you're going, why do you do what you do every day? And I know that's like counterintuitive and a little bit like fluffy, but I promise you the reason that I don't have a job inside of my company anymore is because 3-4 years ago I got super clear. I stopped. I was like, okay, enough. I'm getting burned out. I'm wearing all the hats. What are we going to do here? So to be able to find the key players that will go all in, and he literally owns my sales department. I don't have to do anything inside of sales. Customers don't know my name. They don't have my phone number. My phone virtually never rings. I don't get text messages unless it's from people that I want to be talking to. It's just my current reality is that, and it's fantastic. But it starts with fluffy stuff like getting clear about who are you as a person, why do you do what you do, what are the values that are important to you. There's not a single person that we interview inside of our company that doesn't like enthusiastically want to come work for us. Now, not everybody's a fit for us. And so we don't hire everyone, but there's like when we tell our story, like this is why we exist, this is why we do what we do. Some of our core values are things like we are lifelong learners, right? We got Jeremy back there, Deckmaster Jay. He's focused on like impacting the industry, the next generation of tradesmen by helping them learn how to be better tradesmen, right? That's a core value for us. So we attract people like that have similar vision. My goal is, I heard Dan Martell say this, and I shared this with Anna the other day. My goal is for my vision and dream for my company to be so big that my team's vision and dreams for their life can be realized inside of it, right? It gives me goosebumps, actually. Like I want to create something that Nick can do what he wants to do inside of his life. There's no cap on what he can create in his life because he's a part of Legacy Decks. Like that's what I do, right? So we attract people that want to be a part of something like that. So that was a long, fluffy answer, but I hope that makes sense. So.
Part of getting the job done is having a good team.
Absolutely, man, absolutely. So that's all the time we got, guys. So if you want to connect with me, I don't know what's up with this QR code, but thank you, I appreciate it. One quick housekeeping thing. There is a reminder, please complete the conference evaluation in the mobile app. I did my job.
Can I ask you one super short question?
Yeah.
Do you miss the tools?
What's that?
Do you miss the tools?
Do I miss the tools? Dude, it's been like since 2007, 8, 9 since I was on the tools. Sometimes yes, but not really.
Great presentation.
Thank you,
by the
thank you.
way.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's like- where is it that you said connect? Are you out?
No, I'm not on the show floor. The Legacy Decks Academy is my company. So
Yeah,
are
I
you?
saw that. I already looked
Yeah.
at it.
Okay. Cool. Beautiful.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
so I'll see you around.
Okay. Cool.
Are you walking around?
I'll be on
or
the show
something?
floor at the TimberTech booth today from like 12 to 2 at the TimberTech booth. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm Jean DeMayo. I'm the editor of Pool and Spa.
Oh, fantastic.
I can't even tell what I am. But we also write about decks.
Yeah.
I missed the first like 15 minutes of your presentation, which your presentation was great. I'm wondering if I'm getting my card. Can I get
Yes.
a getting part of your
Yep,
presentation? or
yep.
something? Do you have a card too?
I do not have a card. I do actually.
I'll contact you after the show.
Yeah.
So it was great. It was a really good presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. First time I've done it, so it was a little bit clunky on the numbers stuff. So.
Thank you so much. Bye.
How do you start implementing all those core values and presenting them to your audience?
Yeah.
Who do you target to start attracting people like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me get my stuff off the stage for these guys because they're coming in right behind me. So.
Hey, sorry.